Welcome to this video on Saturn. In this video, I'm talking about how I deal with a strong Saturn. I'm going to go over what a strong Saturn means, what Saturn conjunct Mercury means, and how I work with this energy. If you have a strong Saturn, there's a few ways this can show up. You can have a higher level of responsibility in your life. You could be more focused on problem solving, and that can be in a challenging way or a better way. Like a manager would be a more positive expression. Just being blamed for everything would be the negative expression. And sometimes you have to grow up early when you have a strong Saturn. So let's talk about what a strong Saturn is in the chart by definition. So I would say the strongest Saturn or the more Saturnian personality is going to be a person who has Saturn conjunct their sun, moon, rising, or the ruler of their rising sign. So that would be, again, Saturn conjunct your sun or conjunct your moon. That's going to be within 10 degrees because with the sun and moon, those conjunctions have a wider orb. And then if it's conjunct your rising sign, the closer it is to your rising sign, the more these themes are infused into your life, and the further away, the more of a lighter influence it's going to have. It will still have an influence, but it just won't be as strong of an influence. And then whatever planet rules your ascendant, that planet, if you have Saturn conjunct it, that is also going to give you a strong Saturn. Now, technically, there's other placements in the chart that can make Saturn stronger than average, but these are going to be the heavy hitters, the top ones of a really strong Saturn. Conjunct your sun, moon, rising, or chart ruler. So, that being said, what does it look like in your life if you have a strong Saturn? Well, number one, Saturn rules responsibility. So when you have a strong Saturn, oftentimes you are given more responsibility when you are young, especially. So this can be something like having to take care of your younger brothers and sisters, or something that happens that causes you to have to mature and grow up early and take responsibility in some way. Sometimes people with strong Saturns also will just be raised in strict families where there is not a lot of leniency, or they have something else in their life that they have to sort of rise up to where there's no leniency. And sometimes people with strong Saturns do have certain hardships when they're younger. They can be raised in poverty, or they can be raised with some other kind of limits. And usually with Saturn, these are limits that you don't quickly just shake off. They're limits or limitations, that you kind of have to suffer through. You kind of have to endure something if you have a strong Saturn. So this tends to lead to having a personality where you are more oriented toward the negative. You are more oriented toward what could possibly go wrong because, Saturn does that. Saturn restricts, it limits, it is boundaries. It is, again, responsibility, things we have to step up to. Burdens even go under Saturn. Again, poverty and war go under Saturn. This does not mean if you have a strong Saturn, you go to war, but some people might. Okay, some people might. And there's another part of Saturn that I don't hear talked about as often, and that is the word sacrifice. Okay, Saturn rules the word sacrifice. So if you have a strong Saturn, it's probably true that at some point in your life, you had to sacrifice something. You had to give something up for something else. Or maybe you had to sacrifice something for a family member, or you had to sacrifice something you enjoyed in order to, again, grow up early, grow up soon, be the responsible one, things like that. Another thing about having a strong Saturn is sometimes you get blamed for everything. Sometimes people will treat you when you have a strong Saturn because they recognize the ability to shoulder responsibility within you. In turn, they will not be as lenient with you. So you can have situations in life where maybe on one hand, it's like, yeah, you don't really need lenience, but the challenge with having a strong Saturn is that even if you have a moment of weakness, people will kind of expect you to be strong. So it's like you get no pity. You get no pity when you have a strong Saturn. You get no leniency. You get no one letting you off the hook. They'll let everyone else off the hook, but they will hold to the fire, no matter what, whether it's your fault or not. And so you can become the person who everyone blames just because of that sort of innate inner integrity. The person with a strong Saturn has the integrity to go without something in order for someone else to be comfortable, or in order to get the job done, right? So in work, people with strong Saturns can be given more responsibility than all the other people at work. And this can work in your favor. If it works in your favor, then, you get that supervisor position. People listen to you. You speak with authority. It's all good. Basically, you're going to be the one that people give the most responsibility to because they see that you can handle it. Now, this does not mean that everyone you meet is going to treat you with respect or anything, because whether you get respect or whether you get blame kind of depends on some different aspects and placement and things like that. But basically, having a strong Saturn infuses those themes into your life. Another challenge of having a strong Saturn is sometimes you can be prone to feeling down more often or feeling stuck more often because of that innate infusion between, whatever planet you've got Saturn or, place you've got Saturn. Saturn's kind of infusing its energy into you when it's conjunct your sun, moon, rising, or chart ruler. And so as a result, you can tend to think negatively. You can tend to be more oriented toward what could possibly go wrong than what could possibly go right. And this is a natural thing when you have a Saturn conjunction, is to see the negative. So one of the challenges that can come with this is this tendency to feel limited, to feel stuck, to, see the challenges more easily than you see the possible solutions. And so when you're feeling stuck or you're feeling down, you may find that it's a little bit harder to just, turn the other cheek. Someone who's very Jupiterian, those are the people who are always going to see the positive side. And so you might more easily see the negative side. And as a result, you might find people who are too optimistic slightly annoying. One of the good things I do want to mention about this is that Saturn tends to loosen its grip over time. Most people watching this who have a strong Saturn are not going to be like, and then I was lifted and free and light and happy and frolicking in the woods and the grass with the fairies, you're probably not going to have that life experience. Most likely your life experience will be more grounded, more practical, and more realistic. But Saturn can loosen its grip over time. So sometimes those people who had tons and tons of responsibility earlier in life may even just learn how to let some of that heaviness go as they age and mature. And so the ironic thing is Saturn loosens its grip over time, but it's like you have to grow up in order for that to happen. The wisdom of knowing when not to take the responsibility, the wisdom of knowing, when saying, yes, I'll work harder on this is just not going to give you anything back. Those kind of lessons. So now we're going to go on to Saturn conjunct Mercury. Now, if you have a strong Saturn and you want me to do videos on some of the other placements, comment below. But we're going to talk about Saturn conjunct Mercury in this video because I'm going at it from the perspective of how I work with it. And this is the exact placement I have. Mercury rules speech and it rules how we communicate. It rules how we learn and how our mind sort of is organized. With Saturn conjunct Mercury, the best thing about this aspect is it can infuse a groundedness and a stability to the speech. Now, this can make it slower, but it can also make it more authoritarian, right? The authority of Saturn can be infused into how you talk as well. So this can be on the good side, being able to speak with authority. And when you say something, people take it as the word of God. And now that has positive and negative consequences. We'll talk about that later. It can also make the way you talk a little too authoritarian, right? Especially if you are around people who, just don't like that, right? Because, if you're at work and you're like, yeah, I speak with authority and people like that and they're like, yes, we respect you. Tell us how it is, give us the information, in that case, it's probably going to work better. But if you're around people who maybe don't respect you or your advice or your, unique life experience, I'm thinking of myself right now, they are not going to like that always, right? So not everyone likes that. Saturn conjunct Mercury, again, can make someone a very, very, very good at structured writing. Very, very good at structured speech, like speaking in bullet points, organizing a talk, doing research and knowing kind of what order to put things in. This can come very, very naturally to someone with Saturn conjunct Mercury. Now, if you have a day chart, Saturn is not your worst planet. Therefore, it's more likely this conjunction will probably work out more positively for you. If you have, let's say, Saturn conjunct Mercury up in the top of your chart, 10th house, 11th house or something, it's more likely these qualities are going to be useful in your career. If you have a night chart, which means your sun is below the horizon in the chart, like I do, that means Saturn's your worst planet. So Saturn conjunct Mercury, Mercury is neutral, so it absorbs the energy of the planet with it. So if you have a night chart, this will be more of a challenging aspect. It can still have its challenges in a day chart, but if you're just without putting any work into it, just you moving through the world, the day chart people with this particular conjunction will probably have better results. People with night charts will probably have worse results. So what kind of results can you get with a night chart with Saturn conjunct Mercury? Well, bad speech. Now, does that mean you are the one saying bad things? Maybe the way that you talk is a little more negative. People find the way that you talk limiting because Saturn limits and it infuses its energy into your speech. And so if this is the case, you will know because usually what will happen is people will respond to you with some kind of rebuttal or some kind of defensiveness about how, something positive. They'll spew toxic positivity at you to try to force that limitation they just felt off of them. Even when maybe what you have to say is not intentionally negative at all. It can go both ways where you can say negative things or people can say negative things to you. Keep in mind that sometimes the planets in our chart represent people as well. So if you have Saturn conjunct Mercury, then this could be a sibling, for example, who tries to limit you, who tries to boss you around, who tries to tell you what to do. This would be more common if it's like in your third house. Okay, so then let's say you have a night chart with Saturn and Mercury in the 10th house. Well, maybe you have a boss or always get bosses who are just mean and demeaning and talk down to you and treat you like you're stupid, and like have to be in control, have to be on a power trip. That's another way this can show up. Another challenge too that, Saturn people have, right? So this is for everyone, but, Saturn conjunct Mercury definitely can have is if you assume people want your advice, this is a Capricorn problem, a Saturn problem, is thinking everyone wants your advice, thinking everyone wants to do things the way you have done them. And this will also really offend people. So, take it with a grain of salt. See how it shows up in your life. Know that there's other aspects that can change the dynamic here. Sometimes with Saturn conjunct Mercury, you can just take things very seriously. The way that people talk to you, you could take it really seriously, or you can respond with seriousness in the way that you talk. Sometimes people with Saturn conjunct Mercury have a very, I don't want to say monotone voice, but just like a very serious tone in their voice. Being the serious one. Being the one, sometimes you'll be the grounded one who people come to for advice. So let's talk about how I deal with some of this stuff, and this will segue into the trust thing, because one of the things that I've had to learn having this placement is that people will take what I say as it is the word of God. Now, this is more true when it's like people who I'm not super, super close to, especially people who are asking me for advice. They will take it as like the ultimate, alpha and omega truth, ultimate truth of everything that ever existed. And so this is fine, except for the fact that I'm a human and sometimes I am wrong. So I actually have responded to having this placement and having these experiences by trying my best to be honest when I don't know something and make sure I'm not bullshitting people, because, people will just, even if I just say like, oh yeah, I ate some spinach yesterday, someone will think I'm giving them advice and they'll go start eating spinach. And I'm like, I didn't say eat spinach. This happens a lot. And I've had to really watch how I speak, how I come across, because of this, because of that sort of natural sort of authority that the voice and the words carry with Saturn conjunct Mercury. Now, it can go the other way. It can go the other way where people are like, you said this and I put everything in my life on what you said. And I'm not talking about clients. I'm talking about just in casual speech. Someone will take something I say, get it in their head and make it God. Like now that one statement I said is God to them and it will always be God to them. And so this can be, you can do as much as you can about this, but it does happen sometimes. And so, I try to keep in mind the awareness of the people I'm talking to. I try to say exactly what I mean. Because if I don't say exactly what I mean, it causes bigger problems. And this is an example of how Saturn conjunct anything works, or how the malefic planet in a chart works, is that someone else could say something they don't totally mean and people will be like, oh, that's fine. And they'll let them off the hook. But I cannot get away with saying shit I don't mean. And I will sometimes. And then I have to stop myself and go, wait a minute, I didn't mean it like that. This is what I did mean. So being intentional with how I speak is one of the ways I've worked with this. And I still, notice myself sometimes when I'm talking to somebody wanting to say the most negative thing possible. And I don't mean to, but I'll catch myself and I'll either, say something else positive, or I'll pause before I'm about to say something and really, again, be intentional about trying to say the most helpful or necessary or positive thing, because otherwise I'm just that Debbie Downer who's always like, yeah, I'm tired today. And, people don't like that either. Another thing though that I've done that kind of goes in conjunction with this that can't be skipped over is have some self-acceptance. Now, this is true for every challenging aspect, but I think the tendency to be down on yourself or to be just down in general with Saturnian aspects really does call for some self-acceptance and self-love and letting it be okay if I feel down, letting it be okay that I am prone to the negative, letting that be okay, and not trying to be a Sagittarius Jupiterian superstar who's always like, la. There's someone else who can do that. That's not going to be my role. I have Saturn conjunct my ruler of my chart. I am not going to be Mrs. Positive over here. One of the things I don't do, and I tell people I don't do, is try to force positive thinking, because when you have Saturn in such close, aspect or, and it's a malefic, you're probably not always going to want to think positive, and it's fine. It really is fine. So, that does not mean that everyone who is Saturnian always thinks negatively or is always down, but that for me, because this is one of the ways this manifests in feeling more down, feeling more stuck when maybe I'm not even stuck, and I'll talk about that next, that one of the things that has helped me the most is letting it be okay that I feel that way, because oftentimes for me personally, the feeling I have that I'm not supposed to feel a certain way is actually worse than just letting it be okay. And anytime I'm having like a strong emotion about something, or I'm feeling down about something, or I just can't see a positive outcome of something, when the moment that I remember that it's okay to feel that way, immediately it gives me an energy shift. So that is something that I've used that really, really works. Another thing that has helped me with just in general, having a more positive mindset, working through some of the challenges of this conjunction is Reiki, which is not something everyone watching this will do, but it is something that I've found helps me every time I remember to do it. Every time I get back in the habit of doing Reiki on a regular basis, it has helped me. And so I do have distance Reiki now as one of my offerings, so check out my website for more on that. One of the other things that I just thought of about how I deal with Mercury and Saturn conjunct is that I personally have had to work really, really, really hard to dispel a lot of very, very strict thinking. And what I mean by that is, so for me, when I was 14, I got sober and I started going to 12-step meetings. And there was a lot of good things about that experience. One of the not good things about it was that I was really treated like an adult in a lot of ways that I probably should not have been. And I didn't know this was not good for me. I thought this was great. I was treated like an adult in a lot of ways. I stepped up to the responsibility, and there were a lot of good things about that. It really taught me self-responsibility, and that was such a wonderful lesson. And I've also had to spend a lot of years to kind of go back and realize that some of that was a little too much. And sometimes when we take a lot of responsibility, it is because it is too hard to just feel or let ourselves have the authenticity and the vulnerability that it takes to have a human experience. And one of the things that came with a lot of that responsibility for me was a shitload of judgment. And it got to a point where I didn't even like the person I had become anymore. And so for me, one of the things that I've done is to get out of situations or groups or, there have been a few, more than one different sort of groups that I have joined or belonged to at a certain point that have the message of everything is all your fault. Now, I know a lot of people find that empowering. And if you are someone who you're like, no, when I think of this, I'm so empowered, then good for you. That is wonderful. I am not one of those people. I am not one of those people, and I can confidently say that, and I know that about myself. Therefore, I don't associate with groups of people or even individuals who are of the opinion that mindset is everything is your fault. If whatever happened in your life, you manifested, because I don't find that helpful. Now, you might. And, this video is just to kind of tell people what I've done and what's helped me. It's helped me more to let go of some of those things and be willing to look at how believing that everything is my fault has actually limited me, and how judgmental I became, because it's like you can't have ultimate responsibility without also having ultimate judgment for other people. I think these things are energetically connected. And so in order to have the level of humility that I would like to keep and to be the kind of person that I want to be, I had to break out of strong, rigid, strict belief systems that didn't allow me the room to breathe, that didn't allow me the room to make my own decisions and think my own thoughts. Now, that is just me. And a lot of people find being a member of a group, especially something like 12-step, to be supportive and necessary and empowering. If you are one of those people, I do not want you to just stop doing that. A little disclaimer about the journey of leaving the 12-step program. This was not an overnight matter. This was I really, really, really took my time to make this transition because I had so much fear attached to it. And Saturn also rules fear. If you have Saturn conjunct Mercury, one way to go a little bit further with this interpretation. So the quickest way to get a feel for where this is going to show up in your life is what house in your natal chart does it land in? Where is it? If Saturn and Mercury are in your first house, they're going to describe you, your personality, and what you are like, and this will be a very strong theme. If Saturn conjunct Mercury is in your second house of money, it might show up how you are more reserved or cautious with money and other areas related to your finances. Now, you're still going to have the measured speech, all of the things we said about it, but there's an added influence here of maybe you use your ability to do research or to be thorough to make money, for example. If Saturn and Mercury, that conjunction is in your third house, this is going to deal with communication, possibly siblings. You could have one sibling who acts like Saturn conjunct Mercury. You could have siblings who tell on you all the time when you were little. Things like that can happen, or a sibling who has a Saturn Mercury type personality, like someone who works for the government or does researched writing, right? So keep in mind, it can be someone else in your life that these planets describe. If Saturn is conjunct Mercury in your fourth house of home, you could have had parents who maybe didn't say as much to you, who weren't as talkers, they could have been like the silent type of people. You could have been raised with a lot of discipline, a lot of rules, or you could have been talked to in a way like talked down to kind of when you were younger. Usually people with Saturn in their fourth house grow up with some kind of strict family or something strict about their situation, again, or like, not enough money or some kind of hardship. So there's that. Now, you could also have one situation when you were young where an authority figure or a parent tried to stop you from saying something. And that could range a wide range of possibilities there. If you have Saturn conjunct Mercury in your fifth house, this could all describe one of your children if you have kids. It can also be how you approach your creativity. So maybe you do something creative that relates to structured words, structuring words or structured words is my best guess on that. Sixth house, if you have Saturn conjunct Mercury in the sixth house, that's going to be probably working hard on communication, really perfecting the skill of communication, maybe having a desire to put a ton of effort and make lots of sacrifice for something Mercury related, such as communications, writing, speaking, shipping and receiving, or something else. Mercury conjunct Saturn, if it's in your sixth house, could also describe your relationship with your coworkers, in terms of somehow being infused with a certain level of responsibility and structure and strictness. You could just work in an environment where the way that you have to interact with the other coworkers is like scripted. I think of like a drive-through where it's like they have to say the exact same thing every single time. Why that comes to mind, I don't know, but it's like that kind of thing where it's like you have to say this exact thing, and if you don't, you get fired. So moving on now, Saturn conjunct Mercury in your seventh house. Saturn in your seventh house does not mean you will not find love, first of all, but it can mean that you have periods of isolation where you are not with a partner. Or sometimes Saturn in the seventh, people will have partners who they feel are not quite as emotionally available, or who are more strict. You might have a partner at some point in your life who works for the government or who does a job that is very, strict and structured and has a lot of rules, or they might have that kind of personality where just the way they talk is really serious and really to the point. Saturn conjunct Mercury in the eighth house. Now, this can deal with a few things, but one is you may find that you are the one responsible for other people's money, either through your work or through other things. And the best example I can think of is like the kid who, when their parents die, they're the one who has to take care of it, or something else, something else more serious related to the topic of death. Like you could write wills. You could be a lawyer who writes wills. That's a very specific thing. That's not going to be everyone. Or you could also find that certain topics related to intimacy are somehow connected to Saturn and Mercury. So that could be you are very private about your intimate life. It could also deal with getting out of your comfort zone with Saturn and Mercury here. This would be someone who does not do that as often or does not want to. But when you do, it probably does have amazing results. Saturn conjunct Mercury in the ninth house. This can be something related to travel or the meaning of life or astrology. You could be like an astrological researcher with this placement, but you could also, it could show up in many other ways, but that seriousness and responsibility toward education, you might feel like you are like, it's more your responsibility to speak the truth. Like you might feel that way on you. And like to get to the accurate, right information, and share that with the world, or just want to research everything so you know that what you're hearing is actually legit. You might be a natural fact checker if you have this. Saturn conjunct Mercury in the 10th. I talked about this earlier. You could have a strict boss. You could be the strict person at work, or you could do something like technical writing, or something where your writing is very structured and very thorough, or the way you speak is very serious, and somehow that shows up in your work in some way. Usually Saturn in the 10th also have big goals for themselves. Saturn conjunct Mercury in the 11th, you might find that you're shy in groups or something related to that. The 11th house is also our hopes and dreams. So with Saturn Mercury here, you might have a really strong 10-year plan, 20-year plan going on. That's another way that can be. And then if you have Saturn Mercury in the 12th house, Saturn in the 12th is known to have fears. So this is one where you can be afraid. You can just have a lot of fears that don't make sense, and you have to work harder to kind of get to the bottom of why those fears are even there. You might find that getting sober is a part of your life at some point from something, recovery from something, because the 12th house is where the silent suffering of addiction and mental illness and other things like that. With Saturn Mercury in the 11th, some people with 12th house planets will end up going away from society for something. With yours being Saturn and Mercury, you might find you go away from society to write a book, or to, share your story in some way, or to just think about things. Because with Saturn in the 12th, you can just think about things. So one way to go a step further, and we won't be doing this in the video, but you can always book a private reading for this, is to look at what house in your natal chart Mercury rules to get a better picture of how it shows up. Other things on my mind about Saturn Mercury that I don't want to step over is, one is Mercury rules commerce. Okay. Mercury rules money. It rules coinage, and it's not the money planet in everyone's chart. So it's not the only thing to look at for money, but Mercury conjunct Saturn can mean that when it comes to things like business or money or commerce, that things maybe go a little bit more slowly until you learn the lessons of Saturn, of hard work, discipline, responsibility in that area. I think that people with Mercury conjunct Saturn in general would have a higher sort of aptitude when it comes to business. It doesn't mean everyone with this placement wants to have a business, but that it's possible that those qualities of being thorough and, Saturn can help you maybe understand the rules of business. It doesn't mean you're going to use them. That's up to you. So we'll go ahead and stop there because I could talk about this forever. Let me know in a comment below if you have questions. I always love hearing from you. You can always book a private reading with me. And I now have distance Reiki on my website as an offering. So there is a link in the comments to go to my services page if you would like more on that. And this was fun, you guys. I had fun telling you about Saturn and Mercury. And if you guys want more videos like this, let me know. Let me know if you want one of your placements talked about in a video as well. And that is what I have for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.